creatures, we human creatures, evolved to be in motion, to flee from things, to pursue things, but mainly to exercise our curiosity. We're not fixed in place. We're not like trees.
In 1974, filmmaker Garrett Brown tries something new. He has built a camera stabilizer that he hopes will capture motion as smooth and steady as the eye sees. Brown shoots test footage around his hometown, Philadelphia.
We shot under the arcade at 2nd and Pine. We shot in front of Independence Hall. And driving back from shooting along the Schuylkill, we saw the art museum. I said, let's do this one. Those steps were always dead empty. Nobody was ever on them.
1 year later, Brown captures Rocky flying up the art museum steps, and his Steadicam becomes the most sought-after invention in the film industry.
Inventing is actually a way of thinking about stuff. A functional society is an invention, a form of government is an invention, a nation is an invention, and this one was invented here.
At the dawn of a new nation, debates about art and science animate the streets of Philadelphia. Painter Charles Willson Peale sets out to solve a problem that had confounded inventors for centuries. He wants to make a moving picture.
Something like this is the perfect way to expand his enterprise, make more money, get more people into his gallery, and be more lucrative overall.
But in a world before cameras, no artist has a tool to capture life in motion. Peale will spend 18 months creating painted scenes, building the lights to illuminate them, and the machines to move them. He believes his work will be rewarded by a public hungry for spectacle.
People would pay quite a lot just to come look at a painting, a new painting. It would be advertised and people would come see it. This was even better. This is a painting that moved.
A vision of Market Street in the dark of night. A chorus of morning birds. And then, sunrise.
The wonder of America itself is there for you to see. That is a powerful thing that you can't experience in a still painting, and you can't experience in a live theater production.
He's not a showman in the way that we think of today. He's an Enlightenment showman. The idea that amusements should have value to them, that they should uplift us, they should make us better people. And Peale really believes in that. There's one very dramatic scene from Paradise Lost. Satan and his little imps dancing through fire, almost like an 18th century horror movie.
No Philadelphian had ever seen anything like this before.
Smoke, lighting effects. He's really thinking holistically about this experience.
It really is the magic of cinema in 1785.
And if you were a particularly interesting or distinguished person, Peale might invite you for a private showing. Washington, Jefferson, they all would have been there to see the pictures.
The overall presentation of 5 moving pictures took about 2 hours, so it was an entire afternoon or evening of entertainment. Curiously, 2 hours is still what we expect when we go to the cinema today.
Peele's moving picture show is the first of its kind in the United States. A ticket costs more than a week's groceries. But even the high prices cannot compensate the labor and cost of painting new scenes and maintaining the mechanical equipment. Peele fires the musicians and replaces them with a barrel organ that he himself operates.
And of course, pretty soon everyone in Philadelphia has seen it. You can only see the same show so many times.
Peele couldn't keep up with the demand for this novelty, and the audience fell away.
Unable to afford the time and expense of making new scenes, Peele closes the exhibition and puts his moving pictures into storage.
Think of Peele as a member of a generation that was inspired by a love of liberty and a love of knowledge, to discover the beautiful things in the world through applying reason to the world that surrounds us.
To share his philosophy, Peele establishes the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, the first art school in America. His children carry on their father's ambitions as painters, naturalists, and creators of public spectacle.
The Peele family is impregnated with the idea that they can create a new world, the new world, and they're going to do it.
His son Franklin has a prolific career at the U.S. Mint here in Philadelphia. And he's sent to Europe to help improve the kind of metallurgic process of making coins and currency.
In London, Franklin Peele meets a friend from Philadelphia. With the world on the precipice of a new industrial age, Joseph Saxton now thrills audiences with displays of electromagnetism. Peele convinces Saxton to return to his hometown and take a job at the U.S. Mint.
People had been experimenting with capturing images with light for probably 100 years, but it wasn't until 1839 that somebody actually made a process that worked.
In 1839, newspapers announced that the Frenchman Louis Daguerre has used light to record images on silver plates. The world's first photographs.
In Daguerre's first images, showing the streets of Paris, famously there are no people in them, simply because the exposure took so long that the movement of people made them disappear. There was a man getting his boots polished, and you see his feet, you'd catch a glimpse of the man doing the polishing, but they were the only ones who stood still long enough to be recorded on the plate.
At the U.S. Mint, Franklin Peele's friend Joseph Saxton reads the news. Within hours, he remodels a cigar box into a pinhole camera.
Saxton points this cigar box camera out his office window, happens to be pointing at Philadelphia's Central High School. And as the light comes in over several minutes, it leaves an impression on that silver plate. This happens to be the first recorded image in the history of the United States.
Philadelphia was becoming one of the great industrial cities, one of the great immigrant cities of the 19th century. That Philadelphia, the big industrial working class city, had totally swamped the Enlightenment Philadelphia of Benjamin Franklin and Peele.
in the blocks west of Independence Hall. The Philadelphia we know today is just being born. The University of Pennsylvania, Peale's Academy of Fine Arts,
the Athenaeum, the American Philosophical Society, some of the greatest minds looking to promote what they call useful knowledge.
Inventors create the Franklin Institute, where the thinkers and the doers can kind of get together and share best practices.
The Franklin Institute really pushed people to think differently. You need to push your limits. You need to bring society together to be educated so that they can achieve great things together.
Philadelphia around 8th and Chestnut is the cultural and intellectual center of America.
At this nexus of workshops and clubs sits the shop of silversmith Robert Cornelius.
Cornelius was a founding member of the Franklin Institute and was well known around Philadelphia for his ability to polish silver plates.
After helping Joseph Saxton, Cornelius decides to try his own experiment.
He probably didn't know that the inventors of photography, including Daguerre, didn't have much hope that the process could ever be used for portraiture because it simply took too long to expose the images.
On a sunny day, he set up his camera in an alley, but didn't really think about what he was going to take a picture of. So he just stood in front of the camera. He stood anywhere from 20 to 25 minutes.
He just made a picture of himself. The first portrait in the history of photography emerges as this wonderful, sexy picture of this young guy who had to, move in order to get the camera open and closed. And so he's off center, his hair is a bit mussed, and he looks every bit the romantic hero.
Cornelius recruits his friend, the chemist Paul Beck Goddard, to open a studio for portraits a block from the Franklin Institute.
He had to basically invent what a portrait studio needed. Of course, there were no electric lights, so this work had to be done by natural light. Between certain hours on a clear day, the studio would be open. They were really beholden to the weather.
It was just one chair that had a little clamping device that would hold your neck in place for the 2 to 3 minutes that you would have to sit there.
After Cornelius and Goddard had accelerated the exposure time with bromine, they may have been able to make portraits in as little as 15 or 30 seconds.
On Philadelphia's Market and Chestnut Streets, skylit daguerreotype studios begin to appear, and then pop up in cities across the country. Photography captivates Americans with its potential to reveal the world as it is.
What's really going on is the storage of information, and the information is carried in the light. The very first photograph of a person freezes the information about that person at that time so that now we can go back and look at that picture from 1839.
With daguerreotypists now flooding the marketplace, Cornelius decides to close his studio. For all of his advancements in exposure time, it remains impossible to capture the human body in motion. By 1860, amateur photographers are everywhere in Philadelphia. But Charles Willson Peale's grandson thinks that photography can be more than just static portraits.
Coleman Sellers is a gentleman of Philadelphia in his 30s. He possesses a handsome row house on Mount Vernon Street. But that's not ever enough for someone who's a member of the Peale family.
Walking down 18th Street from Mount Vernon, he'd walk past a few blocks of relatively elite neighbors. And then right at Spring Garden Street, there's this sharp transition. a huge landscape of factories. A noisy place too, as well as a smoky place, a hot place.
The main maker of big machinery in the United States was Sellers and Company. And Coleman Sellers needed a way to show people how the machinery worked.
You can see that someone like Coleman Sellers would be really interested in motion and how to capture motion and how to convey that to the public.
He was so interested that he had his own dark room in his house, which he moved from the basement into the family room, bringing this idea and this experimentation into the heart of the family.
In the parlor, Sellers tries something his grandfather could have only imagined: simulating motion using photographs.
His first subjects for some of these experiments are his own family members.
His wife, Cora, sewing, or rocking back and forth in a rocking chair. His oldest son banging on something.
There was no camera that existed then that could take very rapid photographs. But he saw the capacity of this technology and was trying to advance it.
To see the effect of his work, Sellers inserts his photographs around a wheel which he builds inside a metal encasement. When he turns the handle, the wheel spins and the photos come to life. He patents his invention, the kinematoscope.
He actually gives cinema a name. Kinema becomes cinema, so he gives us the word cinema, but he never markets the kinematoscope to the public.
Coleman is part of a producer's world, part of an engineer's world. He's not in the entertainment business.
He didn't have the ambition to try and make money with moving pictures. He was somebody who was the chief engineer of the most important engineering company in the United States of America. That was the focus of his interest.
Next door, Coleman notices there's a boy that seems an awful lot like he himself was as a boy. Inquisitive, excited by the world, deeply intelligent, and always wanting to know and understand more. And that boy's name is Thomas Akins.
Akins was growing up in a city that was filled with people who modeled their own lives on Benjamin Franklin and Charles Willson Peale.
He goes to Central High School and studies from the Rembrandt Peale drawing manual. Akins shares a lot of characteristics with the Peales, namely that intense interest in the intersection of art and science.
A star student at Central High School, a prodigy in calculus and mechanics. Akins came to the idea of being an artist not at all sure himself what an artist does.
When he makes his great rowing pictures, he creates drawings on grids, extremely detailed, so that he gets every aspect of how we experience optically the river, the rower, the relationship between the oars and the water and the boat. He's very interested in capturing motion, freezing a moment.
The artists of Philadelphia used photography to improve their artwork. This is something that wasn't being done in very many other places, but because this technology was ubiquitous, they thought to do so. And because they were talking to people like Coleman Sellers, they thought to do so.
Philadelphia, crowded with painters, photographers, publishers, lithographers, and inventors, is swiftly developing into the national center for visual media.
Imagine, if you will, 1870, and you're at the Academy of Music on Broad Street in Philadelphia. What you have taking place next is something that audience members had never seen before.
What's advertised as a show of living pictures. Well, people in the city are wondering, what are living pictures?
On a February night in 1870, Henry Heil takes the stage at the Academy of Music with his invention, a projector for glass slides called the Phasmatrope.
As the wheel turns on Henry Heil's Phasmatrope, it projects an illusion of a couple waltzing on screen.
Their waltz, accompanied by a live orchestra, marks the world's first projection of human beings in motion.
People would go up and try and find something behind the screen or touch the wall and figure out what this magic was that they were being exposed to.
And for the very first time, you're seeing images move, and you're seeing it on a screen, and you're with 1,000 other people. It had to have been something you could only have imagined in fantasy books, but now it was real and it was before your eyes.
Under the Academy chandelier, Heil projects an actor proclaiming Philadelphia's technological supremacy.
This beginning of greater things was predicted right here in Philadelphia. The cradle of the motion picture.
But what will the motion picture become? The painter Thomas Eakins believes it has a special capacity to reveal the truth.
Philadelphia is his great subject. But it's not Philadelphia as a gem of cultural refinement. It's Philadelphia as this muscular American place.
Painting action is maybe the hardest thing an artist can do. It's the ultimate challenge.
Eakins learns about the experiments of Edward Muybridge in California. Muybridge is the first to capture live motion and to reveal what the eye cannot see, that a running horse has all 4 hooves off the ground in one instant.
Muybridge was most famous for a series of cameras set in a row, capturing the horse as he moved down the track.
Eakins incorporates Muybridge's discoveries in his painting. He presses the University of Pennsylvania to give Muybridge a home for his research in Philadelphia.
Muybridge came to the University of Pennsylvania. He sets up his row of cameras, and Eakins is basically working as his assistant. And they're trying to get the shutters to open and close faster. Eakins thought that Muybridge was really taking his work in the direction of vaudeville entertainment. Eakins was interested in photography for the purpose of studying bodies.
He was obsessed with the highest level of realism in his paintings. But how do you capture the impossible? How do you show motion?
While working as an instructor at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, Thomas Eakins begins experimenting with the photo gun, which records split-second exposures on a spinning disc. It provides Eakins the precision he craves, a body in thrusts of motion.
That's a huge leap. Eakins becomes totally enamored of this new idea. He sets up his own shed nearby and begins to experiment.
Whereas Muybridge's multiple photographs captured actual movement through space. Aiken's approach involved capturing different moments in the same movement.
It took a painter to imagine such a thing, because that's what painting already was. Paintings are composites of many instances.
With Muybridge, they're small, different shots all lined up. Take one and zero in on it, and there would be absolutely no motion. Akins is able to capture motion on one photograph.
But in 1886, when he exposes a nude male model before a class of female students, his bosses say Akins has crossed the line. They demand
if you could make a flexible photographic medium, a base, you could put it in a reel. So you could make a motion picture film that could go through a film camera where you could do multiple pictures.
Glass can break, it's not flexible, and so he came up with the idea of maybe you could put it on a very thin slice of celluloid.
Now, that's great, except nitrocellulose was highly flammable. When that film got caught in the film frame, as it would do, it would tear, and it stayed there just for a split second. The heat of that light would ignite that film, almost like rocket fuel.
In the same year that Carbot discovers a radical new use for celluloid, Edward Muybridge arranges a meeting at the laboratory of Thomas Edison in Menlo Park, New Jersey.
Edison was very good at taking a lot of elements that were around, that were ready, if you will, to become modern motion pictures and put them together. He sort of invented the modern laboratory. He had a lot of people where he could bring them in to solve certain problems.
Edison's lab engineers buy celluloid from John Carbot to build the kinetoscope, a machine that finally fulfills the dream of an uninterrupted live-action motion picture. With the Edison factory just a short train ride from the show business hub of Manhattan, a new industry takes root 100 miles from Philadelphia.
In the early 1900s, New York City really becomes the center of the motion picture business. And Philadelphia doesn't give it up. Philadelphia continues underground and undercover.
In 1895, Sigmund Lubin, a Polish-Jewish immigrant, runs a factory across the street from Robert Cornelius's old shop. He manufactures hair pomade, lenses for eyeglasses, and magic lantern slides.
All Lubin had to do was close up shop down the alley and across the street. 4 minutes, he was at the Franklin Institute.
While attending a lecture at the Franklin Institute, Lubin is inspired by demonstrations of a new machine that uses flexible celluloid to project long sequences of moving images.
Maybe as much as a minute or two of continuous images. You could actually see moving life as we live it.
He looks at that crude little machine and he sees dollar signs.
Lubin adapts the projector. He calls it the Cineograph. He begins to market it around the country, especially to those who are doing traveling exhibitions. He's supplying them with what he calls life motion pictures.
He thought of himself as a manufacturer. I had all these projectors, I gotta put something through it. So, gee, I'll make films. And as long as it was moving, it was wow.
Lubin starts making motion pictures, and he can't stop. By the winter of 1897, he's got 250 in the can, and by the next summer, he's got 1,000.
Lubin's first big splash in the movie business is at the 1898 National Export Exposition in West Philadelphia, designed to show off products that were ready to be marketed worldwide.
Amidst the spectacle of the city's industrial prowess, Lubin draws a crowd for his Cineograph, placing it inside a new kind of building, a movie theater.
It looked like a Greek temple, and he hired a circus barker to stand outside with a megaphone and, tempt people into the darkness.
Rather than a Nickelodeon where you put a nickel in and you just kind of look inside a box and crank, he said, well, let's put it on a big screen, and then it's a more visceral experience.
To keep the audience coming, he produces comedies and dramas, soon outgrowing his rooftop studio in the city's Tenderloin district. In 1907, Lubin buys a Nickelodeon at 926 Market Street and turns it into the most ambitious motion picture enterprise in the country.
We're going to produce everything in-house. Manufacturing the cameras, the projectors, the sets.
On one floor, there's a studio. On another, there's a theater. On a third, there's a distribution office. It was literally vertically integrated.
He would outfox his rivals. He would always sell his footage for a penny a foot less. Now, a penny a foot less might not seem that much, but if you shoot at 12 frames a second, as opposed to 16 frames a second, you can get the same film with the same title, with very similar action, for about 2/3 the cost. So do you get Lubin's film for $66, or do you get Edison's film for $102?
His competitor, Thomas Edison, wages copyright war against Lubin for selling remakes of his films. But Lubin won't stop. In 1909, he buys an entire city block in North Philadelphia. Here, he will build Lubinville.
Lubinville Studio was a self-contained world. The biggest and the most technologically up-to-date studio in the world.
They'd be shooting 3 films at the same time. You could look down the center of the studio and you could see 3 sets of cameras and all of these sets.
Lighting, costuming, editing, printing, all under one enormous roof.
Lubinville's incredible because they have these agile artists. They can make anything literally within hours. They could create a king's castle. They could create the trenches for an army.
Lubin believed in scientific management. So the quality control was very important. There was a whole line of projectors set up just so that they could check the film. Then they had intertitling in Dutch, in German, and all the different languages. Shipping all those films all over the world, you better have a process in mind.
There was a cafeteria. Everybody got a free hot lunch every day.
And filling Lubinville are employees, just like those in other factories. Movie making is no longer a hobby. It's an industry.
There were young girls who had worked in Lubin's labs, and they said they made so much money working for Lubin that they didn't know what to do with it. They were making more working for Lubin editing films than their fathers were making working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week in a factory.
As far as his employees are concerned, he had what we call in the Jewish tradition a mispuka, a family.
Around the studio, they call him Pop.
But when it came to the actors and actresses, it was a little different.
For one thing, they're working in a greenhouse in the summer. The Klieg lights could be lethal.
Actors report blisters on their eyeballs. But Lubinville manufactures thousands of motion pictures advertised for their brightly lit appearance. Clear as a bell.
The only thing that the Lubinville studio didn't have was outdoor space. There was no back lot. So in 1912, Lubin bought an estate out in Montgomery County.
Near Valley Forge in Betswood, he had farms. He had zoos there, so he could stage these incredibly ornate movies, Civil War battles. There was really no cap on his ingenuity.
Betswood attracts the attention of film entrepreneurs in California. Hollywood's first producers will build their studios following Lubin's model.
When you combine the capacity of the Betswood processing plant and the one at 20th Indiana, Lubin's company could turn out 6 million feet of film a week.
He wanted to make Philadelphia Hollywood before Hollywood. He thought that everything was here that he needed to build this empire.
During a heat wave in the late spring of 1914, temperatures spike inside the storage vaults at Lubinville. On the morning of June 13th, a reel of celluloid film suddenly catches fire, triggering a chain reaction of explosions throughout Lubin's film archives.
It was devastating. A child was killed. It burned down a whole block of houses next door. Reels of film flying through the air and on fire and smashing into living room windows.
The women working in the editing labs race to save the films in production, but the contents of the storage vaults, thousands of films representing Lubin's entire career, are gone in a flash.
Lubin lost the entire record of his career. 2 months after that, the First World War. And Lubin almost overnight lost all of his European markets.
Lubin's in desperate financial straits. So what does? He does what all movie people do. He goes big with action films.
Lubin's at the Tacony Ironworks up in Northeast Philadelphia, and he's staging a fire as part of one of his films. It gets a little bit out of control. The fire starts to rage. The building collapses. It takes out trolley lines. It's a disaster.
Lubin's creditors at the Drexel Bank take control over Lubinville and Betswood.
They were going to fire everybody and just dissolve the company. At that point, Lubin reared himself up and said, I will not sign the transfer papers unless you pay all of my employees the salary that they were promised.
Demoted to vice president of this empire he had created, Lubin decides to retire.
Lubinville is sold at auction in 1917. It will never be a movie studio again.
Lubin passed away pretty much in obscurity. But we can see now, today, that he was the oil in the machine that nobody recognized back then.
All of the Hollywood moguls, like Sam Goldwyn and the Warner Brothers, knew Lubin and benefited from his help in the early days. They all took after him. They all followed the image that he set.
Philadelphia's motion picture industry sputters after Lubin. But on Vine Street, a cluster of film merchants cut trailers, manufacture prints, and distribute new movies for Hollywood studios. At the center of the Film Exchange Row, at his Standard Company, David Starkman plans a daring venture into feature film production.
David Starkman's involvement as a distributor meant that he could understand both the business of making films, but also the business of exhibiting films. It gave him a unique perspective on the business possibilities on both sides.
He owned a theater at 22nd and Ridge, a predominantly African-American neighborhood, and he was not happy with the product he was getting. He thought that African-American marketed silent movies were demeaning, full of stereotypes.
In the movies of that time, racism is everywhere.
David Starkman recognized that this was an audience that was being underserved.
In 1926, Starkman sells his theater and spends his wife's inheritance to form the Colored Players Film Corporation. He invites Sherman Dudley, a show business entrepreneur, to serve as president of the company.
He rented a closed-down theater in Southwest Philadelphia at 5813 Woodland Avenue, the trolley tracks running out front.
They convert the old theater into a studio and begin making films with black actors and white technicians.
There's a healthy amount of dialogue that's going on between the cast and the crew. Starkman is trying to incorporate some of the things that he has learned from them. The Scar of Shame, this masterpiece of the race film era, comes out of that marriage.
Filming in the backyards and front steps of Philadelphia, The Scar of Shame features more than 200 black actors in an epic of life in the city. Actress Lucia Moses portrays a young woman caught in the crossfire of class and race.
One of the things that's interesting about Colored Players of Philadelphia is that it's about life in the North. There's a wide range of classes and backgrounds that are being shown in these films, and I think that's part of the point.
But in 1929, as Starkman plans to install new sound recording equipment, his limited distribution leaves him without the cash flow to secure loans. No bank will lend to him.
Scar of Shame was completed and marketed in the year that The Jazz Singer was released, the commercial birthing of talkies. And so David Starkman found himself on the wrong side of movie history.
Hollywood talking pictures continue to perpetuate racist depictions of black Americans. And the increased cost of movie making consolidates industry power away from independent producers on the East Coast.
The coming of sound was especially devastating to this movement of independent race movie makers. It was more expensive to make the films because of the sound recording technology. It was also very expensive for the theater owners to wire their theaters for sound.
After making 4 films in 3 years, the Colored Players Film Corporation ceases operations in 1929. David Starkman returns to selling prints of Hollywood movies on Film Exchange Row. By the middle of the 20th century, Hollywood-made motion pictures defined the experience of city life for many Philadelphians.
A time-based image is a succession of still images. Our brains are what really create this illusion of movement. It's a language. But really learning how to use that language requires thinking about it and sometimes collectively learning.
I can remember the first time I walked into the Boyd Theater. It was 1978. I was 8 years old. My parents had brought me to see the premiere of Superman. It was the first time I'd been in a cinema that the audience actually talked back to the screen. And it dawned on me that cinema is this kind of very democratic art form that if you can afford the ticket, anyone's invited.
More than 400 movie theaters line the streets once walked by Charles Willson Peale and Sigmund Lubin.
On either side of our apartment was 2 movie theaters on the same block, the Ben and the Benson. My bedroom was on the front of our apartment facing Woodland Avenue, so I do remember every night going to sleep with the light of the 2 marquees shining into my bedroom.
Seeing a movie is a big deal. Traveling with my mom, my brother and sister, and taking the subway and then taking the L and then going to movie theaters on 52nd Street. Sometimes people would spend a whole afternoon and evening in the theaters.
The movie theaters in Center City were our entire lives. You could go from the Sam Eric to Sam's Place to the Eric Twin, back to the Eric Rittenhouse, and then down to Broad and Chestnut.
We could take the number 2 bus and ride downtown to Market Street and get off there. Here you were in this gorgeous movie theater, very large theater with a big screen and a really impressive feeling to the experience.
My mother would pack a little lunch for me in a paper bag and, get rid of me for like the whole day to sit at the Breeze Theater on Point Breeze Avenue and watch cartoons and a film.
In North Central Philadelphia, there were 2 movie houses where the movies that were featured were all in Spanish.
If it was a Saturday matinee, you basically saw your entire neighborhood there.
You get that sense of awe that you're going to someplace grand, someplace special, someplace with history to see some exciting piece of art, hopefully.
In a weird effect, those were our secular churches, those theaters. We had these places to worship movies in. It was great.
But in the 1970s, hundreds of industrial firms and thousands of jobs exit the city.
Philadelphia had a reputation in those days for being dirty and dangerous and broke, and it was all of those things in many ways.
Philadelphia is not today as it was in the 18th or 19th century, the leading city in the United States for everything.
By the 20th century, Philadelphia's family firms are not well positioned at all to be the buyers in this world of corporate conglomerates. They are the sellers. The firms that get bought up are often shut down.
The Stanley Theater, a cinema landmark here at 19th and Market Streets for 49 years, has been sold to a real estate developer and will make way for another one of those high-rise office buildings.
So here I am, 3,000 miles from Hollywood. I got gear from a guy that went bankrupt in Philly, Lou Kelman, who got half of his gear from Sigmund Lubin. So I'm sure some of Lubin's gear ended up on the floor of my barn studio.
Garrett Brown studies the craft of filmmaking at the library and begins a career producing television commercials.
I found an 800-pound dolly. 4 of us each had to lift to get it in a pickup truck and lay the rails and wrestle it on there. You'd have 40 takes to try and land correctly on this thing and level and so on. If you handhold the camera, every time you move, it changes the angle of the camera. The challenge is, how do you carry the thing but not influence it?
Brown sets out on a quest. He hunts for gyroscopes to keep the image level, fiber optic tubes to transmit the image to his eye, and crane arms to support a 35mm camera. After a week of solitude in a motel room, he emerges with a stabilizer for handheld shots.
Well, this is my shop. This is my reliquary, where all the relics are. The old Steadicam prototypes are all here, such as this is the pole rig, because it started out as a pole. A couple of weights, camera here. It's amazing how stable this is. But when you tilt up, the lens rises. That's annoying. Look, we're making our movie from birth. When you walk around, that's your personal movie, and it's beautifully stable. And you operate, you might say, your eyes with incredible precision. You go boom and boom, like the best operator on earth. So why should your movies be any worse? This is the original prototype of what is today's Steadicam. World War II Arriflex camera, fiber optics viewfinder, motor, battery, gimbal, and this sucker really worked.
He compiles a reel of 30 test shots and sends them to Hollywood. Filmmakers are stunned. They never imagined movies could move like this.
The Steadicam actually lets you walk in the character's shoes.
That video, 30 impossible shots, went around the world in 35mm. They made copies of it. They sent it to Kubrick and to people everywhere. Avildsen saw it, who was directing Rocky, and said, "How did you do that, and where are those steps?"
Brown's invention transforms those steps into a worldwide symbol of Philadelphia. The Steadicam becomes an indispensable tool for filmmakers everywhere. For his achievement, Brown wins an Academy Award in 1978.
People have asked me, would any of this have happened if I was living in LA? I don't think I would have had the nerve to do that in a place that was large or unfriendly.
It's definitely part of the culture of Philadelphia to, step out and invent things, to be a problem solver. There was a culture of the amateur, of the person who was like meddling across the boards that you see in Benjamin Franklin or you see in Charles Willson Peele.
I think Charles Willson Peele and Thomas Eakins would have been delighted that he finally cracked it. He got the human body in motion in ways that they could only dream of.
We got lots of eccentrics here. It's good, and always have. Where do you find that? It's at least on my doorstep here, and I love that.
singers and rockers who transcended this world in the 90s. It's time to stir the melting pot of deadly delights. The Dead 90s Review.
Austrian rock singer Falco records. Put me up a dance!
society because I have to flair. But I'm the truth about what you do. But I'm Mr. Come and rock me up a face.
When you're alone and life is making you lonely, you can always go downtown. The noise and the hurry seem to have nobody knows. Downtown, just listen to the music of the traffic in the city. Linger on the sidewalk where the neon signs are pretty. How come the lights so much brighter there? You can forget all your troubles, forget all your cares. Go downtown. It's a big break when you're downtown. A finer place for sure. Downtown. Everything's waiting for you.
Gardens are small lands. 21st century's yesterday. You can care all you want. Everybody does, yeah, that's okay. So slide in and give me moves are so raw. I've got to let you know. 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 You're my kind. I need you tonight, 'cause I'm not sleeping. There's something about you that makes me sweat. I'm lonely. Can't take it all. Gonna live life. I'm lonely. Hallucinate to segregate. Alleviate, try not to hate. Love your mate, don't suffocate on your head. Designate your lover's fate. One won't say as you can fade. She never dropped the same conversation. She's got just like a baroness in a little man. China, down to get your mind up. And again, accidentally, midnight away. She couldn't care less for singing and precise. She's a killer. Queen, gunpowder, Trinity, dynamite with a laser beam. Guaranteed to blow your mind. Jesus really at it. Ring for us and pussycat. Momentarily out of action, temporarily out of hand. She absolutely drive you wild. She's got to get you. She's a killer. Queen, gunpowder, Trinity, dynamite with a laser beam. Guaranteed to blow your mind. Ooh, recommend another place. Insatiable and appetite. What a try. Sometimes the road just hypnotizes me, and I just love your flashy ways. This is why they're broken, you're so mean. Sometimes the world just hypnotizes me. And I just love your flashy ways. Guess it's why I'm broken your soul.
I can fill you with real millionaire shit. That's car broke, my car broke. 160, Swift. Wrecking by the one. The crew run, the crew run. I know you sick of this. Come through, have sex on rough, that's perfect. Come up to your job, hit you while you're working for certain. Freaking, not speaking, need that ass leaking like rapper demo. Tell them, take your clothes off slowly. Hit them with the force like Louis, dick black like Louis, watch me room like Louis. Lucky they don't owe me, with the same show me, homie.
Baby, can't you see? I just love your flashy ways. Guess it's why they broken your soul. Sometimes the world just hypnotizes me.
the dumpster players.
Prepare for the thrust, receive the pain, and let us violate you. But don't miss 9-inch 90s.
on the love seat. So I keep singing, I'm singing to complain about a shotgun wedding and a stain on my shirt. Don't believe everything that you bring. You get a parking violation and a maggot on your sleeve. So shave your face with some mace in the dark. Saving all your fruits and burn down the trailer park. Yo. Cut it. Yes. One's got a weasel and other got a flag. One's on the pole, shoved together in a bag with the rerun shows and the cocaine doja. The ding the crap on the phone singer spot. He hung himself with a guitar string. His other tricky neck and it's hanging from a green wing. But yeah, right, if you can't relate, trade the cash for the heat, for the body, for the heat, and the time for the piece of wax. Falling on the turnpike, and choking on the splitters. see, it's kinda hard being a Snoop D or Double G, but I somehow, some way, keep coming up with funky ass shit like every single day. May I kick a little something for the G and make a few ends as I breeze through. 2 in the morning and the party still jumping cause my mama ain't home. I got bitches in the living room getting it on and they ain't leaving till 6 in the morning. So what you wanna do? Shit, I got a pocket full of brothers and my homeboys do too. So turn off the light. Laid back with my mind on my money and my money on my mind. Later on that day, my homie Dr. Dre came through. With a gang to tangle right and a fat ass J of some robotic product that made me choke. Shit, this ain't no joke. I had to back up off of it and sit my cup down. Tangerine chronic, yeah, I'm fucked up now, but it ain't no stopping. I'm still popping. Drink out some bitches from the city of Compton to serve me. Not with a cherry on top, cause when I bust my nut, I'm raising the vodka cops. Don't get upset, girl, that's just how it goes. I don't love you hoes, I'm out the dump, and I'll be rolling down the street, talking well, sipping on gin and juice, laid back with my mind on my money and my money on my mind. Rolling down the street, talking well, sipping on gin and juice, laid back with my mind on my money and my money on my mind. Rolling down the street, talking well, sipping on gin and juice, biatch with my mind on my money and my money on my mind. Rolling down the street, talking well, sipping on gin and juice, biatch.
Thank you.